Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Neglected by Family Overpowered Council Bashing. Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. October 10th is a day that shall always be remembered to the citizens of the Leaf as a disaster. As this night will be remembered as the night the Kyuubi, also known as the Nine-Tailed Fox, nearly destroyed the Hidden Leaf. Many brave souls in the way of shinobi and kunoichi this night would put their lives on the line to protect not only the Leaf but those important to them. One such shinobi was standing atop the Hokage monument now. As he took in the sight of all that was happening, he thought to himself that he would much rather be with his wife right now, who was recuperating from not only giving birth to quadruplets but also having the 9 tails released from her body due to the seal being weakened from her giving birth. This, however, was something that couldn't be avoided. Minato Namikaze knew what he would need to do to save everyone he could, but he would have to give up his own life to do so. In the end, it was a choice he was more than willing to make, but he feared for his children whom he would have to seal the beast inside of. He knew it would be hard for them growing up, but he hoped that the village would see them as heroes. But fate seemed to be on his side, if not in a twisted sort of way, as he made the necessary hand seals to perform the Reaper Death Seal. When the Shinigami appeared in its ghostly form, he knew that it was too late to turn back, but what made his skin crawl was not the fact that he was about to die, no, for when he summoned him the Shinigami spoke. You are the luckiest mortal who will ever use this jutsu for this one time only. Since you have helped to father the chosen one, I will not take your life, but if you use this seal a second time, I will collect your soul without a second thought or a shred of remorse. No, for the payment this time I will collect a different currency from you. The ghostly form said as Minato sealed the fox into his 4 children, the yin and yang of the beast into his 2 daughters, the soul into his second son, and the excess chakra that was still running amok into his eldest son, using the 8-sign seal, which would have a profound impact later on for the eldest son of the Hokage, for at this very same time someone else in the Leaf was also sealing the excess chakra they could siphon from said fox into another newborn child whose fate would intertwine with that of the eldest child. After this warning, Minato rushed to find his wife, fearing for her life at the words of the Shinigami, but when he found her, she was alive and well, which gave him great relief. With the disaster averted for the most part, now the village turned its focus to healing the wounded and finding the bodies of the dead. Everyone had better not be slacking, you hear me? If I even think you're not giving it everything, I'll drive you through a wall, roared a beautiful blonde woman as she walked through the hospital. Said woman being one Tsunade Senju, one of the legendary Sannin, as she stormed into the hospital after checking on the Uzumaki Namikaze family. Glancing around and noticing the lack of attention directed at her due to the craziness of the whole situation, Tsunade turned her right-hand woman, assistant, and student. What's the situation looking like so far? Shizune, she roared, not seeing said women anywhere. Tsunade-sama. The injured have been reduced by half thanks to the field staff dealing with situations outside of the hospital that weren't severe enough to warrant admission. From the number of patients and medics, I'd estimate that we're just about finished treating the ones who have been admitted, and I haven't seen more than 7 patients be admitted in the past hour. I think most of the shinobi and villagers who were injured have been taken care of, replied a pretty yet exhausted woman with raven color hair, now known as Shizune. Releasing a relieved sigh that she had been holding, Tsunade voiced her relief now that the situation was under control. Phew, that's good. I feared that there would have been many more injured and dead than there were, thank goodness. That means that all the injured are accounted for, meaning that the village got out in extremely good shape when you look at other villages who were attacked by Biju. Sharing a sigh of relief with her mentor, Shizune remembered the 2 who were in the middle of the attack. Tsunade-sama, you said that all the injured were accounted for, right? What about Kushina-sama and Minato-sama? Shouted a worried Shizune, having momentarily forgotten about her village's leader and his wife. Relax, they're safe. Minato had a severe case of chakra exhaustion, but he'll be alright knowing him. Kushina, other than the typical signs of having just given birth, is completely fine as well, thanks mainly in part to her Uzumaki longevity. Even after having the QB forced out of her, she's still alive and is going to make a full recovery. She'll be up and about in a few hours. Look, I'll even make a bet with you about it, I'm so sure. Tsunade confidently replied, so confident that she offered to make a bet with Shizune about it, which, given her nickname as the legendary sucker, was no small statement. The two shared a relieved and happy laugh as the danger that had threatened the whole village was finally past. That is, until Tsunade realized that Shizune was also laughing at her mentor's extremely notorious bad luck and chased her around the hospital wing, her fists waving threateningly in air anime style, while the other occupants and staff of the hospital laughed in good humor at the antics of the two. Until a young nurse came running up to the duo and told Tsunade what had just happened in another wing of the hospital and handed her a chart before heading back off to take care of her duties. Shizune had overheard what had been said and had her hands over her mouth as she looked at her mentor, whose face was both angry and sad at the same time. As Tsunade looked up from the chart, she looked off into the middle distance as the question that was on her mind came from the lips of her student. How do we break the news to her? Shizune asked, as she knew that it wouldn't go over well with who was going to be receiving the news. After waiting for a response for almost a minute, she asked a second time, what do we do, Tsunade-sama? She looked to the other women for the answer, only for her to reply with, I don't know. Back at the Uzumaki Namikaze estate, Minato, are you sure that you're alright? You used the freaking Reaper death seal, but somehow you didn't lose your soul like what was supposed to happen. Don't you find that this is just a bit too strange? A tall man, with a spiky white hair that reached his mid-back and red paint markings on his face, worriedly asked his former student, now Hokage. This man was Jiraiya, also one of the legendary Sannin and mentor to Minato. Sensei, I told you I'm fine. Look, I can do everything without any problems. I need to go see Kushi-chan and my kids, so please don't worrying, everything is fine. Minato replied, creating his fabled Rasengan just to emphasize the point he was trying to make to his mentor. With a sigh, Jiraiya relented, putting a hand on his student's shoulder. He congratulated him not only for his defeating of the QB but also the beginning of his family. I'm proud of you, Minato, you've come so far even without my help. I couldn't have asked for a better student in all my life. Jiraiya said, pride filling in his voice as he walked with Minato towards the room set up specifically for his children. Opening the door quietly, they found what they were looking for. Kushina, with her arms full of their 4 children. Wordlessly walking towards her and sitting down, he wrapped her and their children in a loving embrace. They're beautiful, Kushi-chan, Minato said. Just before he could relax, there was a knock at the front door, which Jiraiya informed Minato about. Rising from his place, he went to see who it could be due to all that had been happening. When he and Jiraiya reached the door, they found Tsunade and Shizune at the door, with Shizune carrying a newborn in her arms. Both women had a less than pleased look on their faces. May we come in? Tsunade asked, to which Minato gestured for them to enter, after which both women turned to them as Minato turned to face them once the door was closed. Minato couldn't help but wonder what had happened to make them come here at this hour, and whose child was sleeping in the raven-haired girl's arms. Jiraiya found it just as strange but knew better than to get on Tsunade's bad side and kept his mouth shut. As they both look at Tsunade, we need to talk to you, all of you. Indicating Kushina as well needed to be part of the coming conversation. Leading them to the room where his wife and kids were entering, Tsunade couldn't help but fawn at her god kids, who were just the cutest. To which Kushina smiled at her until she looked to Shizune and saw the newborn in her arms. Shizune, who's your passenger? She asked, somewhat confused at the sleeping child. At this, Tsunade was snapped back to the whole reason that the two of them had brought the child with them here. She smiled sadly and looked Kushina in the eyes before she said, this is Yumiko's son. Tsunade said as Shizune passed him to Minato for the both of them to see, which Kushina and Minato both smiled at the young babe as he slept soundly. Oh, He is so cute, she must be so happy. Kushina said, then paused as she wondered why they had brought the baby here when she would have seen him when. She looked around and then at Tsunade. Where is Yumiko and why is he not with her? She asked, a slight bit of confusion and worry in her voice. When both women looked away and didn't say anything, Kushina stiffened as shock, then sadness came over her as she looked at the baby and back at them with tears forming in her eyes. She didn't want it to be true with all of her heart, she wanted it to be a bad joke, but the look on Tsunade's face said it wasn't. How? The question was quiet but was so cold that a chill ran down the two women's spines. Shortly after she gave birth, they tried to bring her back but. Shizune said, leaving the last part off didn't lessen the sadness that Kushina felt at the loss of her sister. Looking back at the baby who was her nephew, no, her new son, knowing full well that if they didn't adopt the boy as a full member of the family he would be used by the council in ways she didn't want to think of. As she looked at him, he stirred in Minato's arms for a moment only to fall back to sleep. She couldn't help but to smile a bit. Jiraiya put a hand on Minato's shoulder as he spoke, I'm so sorry both of you for your loss. The mentor's words did little to make the situation any better, but both of the newfound parents took some small measure of comfort in his word. While he had only met her a handful of times in the past and known her for a short time while she lived with them in the village, Minato had liked Yumiko and thought of her as family in every sense of the word. In fact, when she had come back to the village after moving to a small village with her husband after his later death which prompted her return, it was Minato who had told her she always had a place in the family estate they lived in and that she didn't need to even ask. We know that this is not the best time to ask, but. Yes. Kushina spoke before Tsunade could even finish her question, we will adopt him and raise him as ours. It is what my sister would have wanted. Kushina said, taking the boy from Minato to add to her already full arms. Looking at the two women, what's his name? She asked. Tsunade blinked for a second, caught off guard by the sudden answer that she was given before she regained focus and replied. She died before she could name him. Tsunade said, at which Kushina felt tears slide down her cheeks at the thought that her sister never got to even hold her son, let alone name him. But this little one who managed to make it by the grace of Kami needed a name and a family. She would be damned if she let her sister down by not giving this boy a home and all the love she would have if she were here. She knew without a doubt in her mind that if the situation had been reversed, Yumiko would have taken Naruto, Menma, Mito, and Narumi, adopted them and raised them as her very own and given them all the love she had to give. It saddened her that her family had lost a member, but seeing that little baby boy in her arms brought her joy as well. She may have lost one member of the family, but she gained a new one. Well, we can't have that now, can we? Kushina mused, looking down at hers and Minato's little bundles of joy. The room turned from somewhat somber back to happy as they all thought of what would be a good name for the boy. Minato put forward the idea of Izuma but was shot down by Kushina. Jiraiya's idea Yuto was vetoed as well. Other names were put forth when finally, Kushina looked up from the boy. How about Koga? She asked as the room went silent for a minute, and then Tsunade spoke up saying, I like it. Smiling down at her new son, she stroked the side of his cheek. She saw him smile and knew she had named him well. Shortly after, the two Sanin and Shizune left, leaving the two alone with their children. Sinking into her husband's embrace, Kushina sniffled a bit before expressing her sincere thanks to whatever entity that allowed her family to stay together for the most part, through what seemed like impossible odds. Even though she was saddened by her sister's death, she was just as grateful for her husband and children surviving. Mina-kun, we're together. We're all together. You didn't have your soul taken, and I survived having the QB removed from my body. We're going to be able to watch our children grow up and they'll have a family to love and take care of them. Kushina whispered as she sobbed quietly while shaking a little, the all too real possibility that she could have lost her husband and her life, leaving her children alone in the world with no one to care for them, taking a toll on her. Nuzzling his wife and holding her closer, Minato reassured her that nothing would ever threaten to tear about their family again. All through the night, Parents and children stayed together until sleep took them, as the mental and emotional exhaustion that the two had accumulated had finally reached its peak. Looking down upon the scene before him, the Shinigami knew that what he was going to do would change everything for the family, but a bargain was struck and the debt must be paid. Sleep well, child, for the price that replaced your father's soul will greatly affect you. As the child of prophecy, and the child who will change the world, you will be without the love of the ones who should love you the most. That is the exchange that I had made in place of your father's soul. You will be without love, but you will be the one who will defy all obstacles that will stand in your way. As you will forge a path that will change the world, remember this one thing: do not give in to the hatred that will undoubtedly plague your heart in the future to come, for you must rise above it. What the Shinigami did not know was that to balance the scales, his sister Kami made a few changes to his plan, as she knew that if his plan were to succeed, it would not only destroy a family but lead the child of prophecy to not only forsake everything he was supposed to protect, but it could very well lead to him destroying everything and bring about the end of the world. Time skip 8 years. As time passed, it seemed that things would go mostly the way the Shinigami had said they would, as the scene that was being looked down upon by a silent observer made him somewhat saddened, as in the private training area of the Uzumaki estate 4 young children were being trained on the art of chakra control by both Kushina and Minato, as 4 young kids tried to walk up a tree using only chakra and nothing else. Falling to the ground for the 3rd time that training session, Menma complained, "Ka-chan. 2-san. Can't we learn any cool jutsu yet?" Which was responded to with a patient-toned response of, "When you have better chakra control, then we move on to a jutsu or two, but first learn the basics." From Minato. Kushina, who was standing next to her husband, commented on Menma's complaint with, "Good chakra control is the key to being able to do all kinds of things in the way of jutsu. I've told you before that when I was young, I had a lot of chakra but no control, so I couldn't do much in the way of jutsu, and it made it hard for me to learn things. This is why it is important to practice good chakra control so that you won't end up like I used to be back when I was young." While she knew the boy wouldn't like her answer to his complaint, he wouldn't argue with her either, due to the fact he knew that she wouldn't hesitate to get her point across by knocking some sense into him. Koga Uzumaki Namikaze had seemed to get the understanding of it better, but only by a small margin. Born the same night as the other Uzumaki Namikaze siblings, he favored Kushina in hair color, as his hair was a vermilion red, but he had a mix of his parents' looks. His eyes were just like Yumiko's, a clear bright aquamarine with a slight green tint. While she would guess that he had his father's jawline, he had on a black t-shirt with the Uzumaki crest on the front and tan cargo shorts. As the 4 siblings tried, fell, and tried again, one would think that it was a happy family moment of the whole family. But one member was absent from the scene that would have been seen as normal. When everyone was headed inside, Kushina and Minato had looked at each other, as they knew one member of the family was sadly missing. As they turned and headed in, Koga had stayed outside for a minute. Looking up, he saw Naruto, who had been watching from a tree, and gave his brother a gesture to come inside and try to spend time with the rest of the family, but Naruto shook his head as he stood on the branch and hoped down to the street side of the wall. While Koga and Naruto got on well, the rest of the siblings didn't. Menma seemed to almost hate his brother, but before they turned 6, he would always be trying to act like Naruto. Now it seemed like the boy just wanted to be rid of him. The 2 sisters seemed to avoid Naruto as if he were a stranger to them, but much like Menma, they too had a better relationship with the young boy when they were younger. As for his parents, they tried to include Naruto and even tried to be close to the boy, but every time they tried or would go to ask him to join them for practice, they would feel a sense of overwhelming dread take hold of them, like the world would end if they even went near Naruto, and would chicken out, or they would look for him and find the boy would just be gone. He would come home late and head out early. It was as if he were avoiding them, which in all fairness could have been seen as true. 1.5 years back, the 2 of them had yelled at him for trying to do the water walking exercise without supervision, and it had gone a bit too far when they had said some things that no parent should say to their child. Now that they looked back, both of them wished they could take back what they had said and how they acted, but knew the only thing they could do now was be better and show him they loved him. Naruto walked the streets of the village mostly ignored by the majority of the people who lived there. Only about a dozen people maybe seemed to even notice the boy and didn't act like his family did. One such pair of people were Hana and Sume Inazaka. Along with their partners, the two women were nice to the boy and would let him and Koga come over to play with the ninkin when they were free. The pair had met the boys one day after Naruto had run out of the house due to Menma telling him that he should get lost. Followed by Koga, who wanted to try and fix the problem that had been going on for a while now between his two brothers. The boys, having not looked where they were going, found themselves in the Inazaka kennel face to muzzle with Kuromaru and the Heimaru triplets. When mother and daughter ran to see what the commotion in the kennel was, they found the two boys being licked to death by the ninkin, who had taken an instant liking to them, which was a rare sight to see for the two women. After that, Naruto and Koga had played with the dogs till they were worn out. The picture that Sume had taken of the two boys napping along with the four ninkin in a pile made her squeal with delight, as her female genetics that seemed to make women think things are cute kicked in and ran to get Hana, who had the same reaction as her mom did. After which they took the two boys back home and showed Kushina the photo of the boys and ninkin napping together, which caused her to squeal just like the two Inazakas had. After that, the two women would stop Naruto when they saw him and ask how he was doing, among other things. Alongside the two of them were the Ichirakus, who owned the ramen stand that Naruto liked, but then again everyone in the family liked their ramen. Makoto Uchiha, Kushina's friend and aunt of a sort to the five kids, along with Yugao Azuki, a member of the Anbu, who was like a big sister figure to him and Koga both. Might Guy, who while he was friendly enough and even helped Naruto with his taijutsu, sometimes Lee and Koga would join them now and then. He was just a bit too enthusiastic for him at times. Izumi Uchiha, who was nice and had encouraged him to try and do his best and never give up, this had helped more than she would ever know. Naruto saw her as another sister figure, but one he could tease about how she needed to talk to Itachi Uchiha and tell him how she felt, or she would lose him to some else. This of course made her threaten that she would steal all the ramen in the village and burn it, which would make Naruto beg her not to do such a horrible thing. Shino Aburame, who had asked the boy if he would go bug hunting in the woods outside the village with him from time to time, which they both enjoyed. Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akamichi, who were both nice to him and even tried to be friendly, but when Menma would come around he would leave, telling them he had to go. And last but not least in the list of persons who knew the young blonde was one Anko Mitarashi, who loved to both tease and prank the boy and would chase him, be chased by him around the village, as well as be pranked in return by the young boy. This had been the normal for a few years now. While things at home were not getting better, in fact they seemed to be getting worse, Naruto would keep to himself mostly or go train with Koga, who was the only member of the family that didn't have a problem with getting close to his brother but was trying to get everything back to how things used to be before they turned 5. If not training with his brother, he would just be scarce in general, going to the training spot that the two boys had found that was secluded from most of the village. It was also a great spot to skip rocks and just go when he wanted to be by himself. He never spoke up much or gave his opinion on things when they would go for family outings and or go out to eat. He figured it would just be a chance for someone to get mad at him, so he kept quiet. But what the family didn't know was that Naruto had a secret sibling who was sealed inside him. What his father hadn't realized was when he had sealed the fox's excess chakra inside Naruto, the sealing method he had used had mixed the chakra with some of his son's own chakra and also taken a small amount of chakra from a passing by dire wolf that had gotten too close. The three chakras that had been sealed inside him merged to make a whole new tailed beast, which Naruto met the night his parent had punished him for trying to water walk by himself. Looking back on the memory of how he met the wolf pup who shared his mind, he couldn't help but wonder if what he had planned to do tonight was the right thing. Flashback 1.5 years. Naruto awoke to find himself in a forest of trees that looked like they went on and on. The trees themselves being a light brown color with green leaves that were too high up to reach unless he tree walked, and even then, it looked like he would have a bit of a walk before he got to the lowest branch. Naruto wondered how had he gotten here. Last thing he remembered was crying in the corner of his room. Just to make sure this wasn't a dream, he pinched himself and felt it with a small, ouch. He knew it was real. This made Naruto try and think how could he have gotten here, as he thought he heard a sound that drew his attention away from his thoughts. It almost sounded like someone crying, and being the curious child that he was, went to see where it was coming from. After a few minutes of searching, he found the source of the sound and couldn't believe it. In a small clearing, a lone wolf pup lay curled up in a ball, whimpering. With slow, steady movements as to not startle the pup, he moved closer till he reached out a hand and tried to comfort the small pup. When his hand met fur, the wolf's head snapped up as he jumped back, only to find the boy he was sealed inside of crouched near him with his hand stretched out. The small ash-gray wolf stared at him for a second before he spoke. "Why are you here?" the pup said, those short sobs. Naruto blinked several times before almost jumping a whole foot back. "Why just talked," the blond boy stated, which earned him an eye roll from the wolf as he stared at him. "Of course, I can talk, you act like it's a big deal," the pup said with a bit of irritation in his voice. "Kuromaru talks and yet you don't find that strange." Stunned for a brief moment by that fact and for the fact that he had now met two animals that could talk, Naruto looked the young wolf pup up and down before asking, "Who are you and why were you crying just now?" The young wolf looked at him like he had stupid written on his face in big bold letters. "I am alone. Why else do you think? I have been here all by myself with no one else around." "How long have you been here?" Naruto asked. "Ever since you father sealed the chakra of the 9 tails in you. I also have all the fox's memories up till the portion of excess chakra was sealed inside you, but what your father didn't know was that when he sealed the chakra inside you, it took a small amount of your own chakra and some of that of a passing by wolf that got too close. When it all was mixed together inside the seal, I was born," the pup said as he sat next to Naruto. "So, what you're saying is that you're the son of the Kyuubi?" Naruto asked, eyes wide at the statement that the wolf pup just made a moment ago. "Kind of, but when I woke up, I was here, and no matter how much I looked, no one was here with me. I have been alone from day one," the young pup said, making Naruto's heart ache for him as he was able to relate in a small way to the wolf. "What's your name?" Naruto asked the wolf pup, only for it to shoot him a glare. "Are you trying to be funny? I don't have a name. Did you not just hear me say I have been here all by my lonesome since day one with no one to give me a name?" the wolf said, a bit of heat in his voice. "Well, how about I give you one?" Naruto said, making the wolf blink at him with a stunned look on his face. "Why you would really do that?" he asked, as if it were unheard of, all trace of heat gone from his voice. "Of course, I would. Everyone deserves to have a name." Naruto paused for just a moment. "Plus I know what it's like to be alone too," he finished as he stroked the fur of the pup next to him. Snorting, the pup turned his head away from the boy. "How would you know what it's like to be alone? You have a family," the wolf said with a bitter tone to his voice. When the wolf looked back at Naruto, he saw a gray cloud had formed over Naruto's head like it was about to rain, which made the wolf blink just to make sure it wasn't imagining things. The boy's head low and looking down at his feet as he spoke. "They don't see me like that. They avoid me like I'm a stranger or treat me like I am not worth their time." He looked away from the wolf and muttered, "Some family. What about your one brother who trains with you and spends time with you?" the pup questioned. "Koga is the only one who seems to treat me like family and even tries to get the others to do things with me or even asks my opinion most of the time, though it just ends with Menma telling him that it isn't worth the time to ask me and they end up arguing or my parents telling us to behave," the young boy remarked. "He also says that I should try to find a way to fix things with everyone, but every time I try it ends up going bad and I just feel worse afterwards." "Do you hate them?" the young wolf asked. "No, I don't hate them. In fact, I love them, all of them. I just wish that they would see me as family too," Naruto replied before perking up. "Now then, about that name, let's see who Ko. Yes, that sounds about right," he said, doing a 180 on topic and mood. To the wolf's confusion, the small cloud that had formed over the boy vanished as fast as it had come, like it was never there. Ko. The newly named pup repeated, trying it out. Yup, it means happiness. Also, it's a prayer that one day you and I will find happiness and love. The boy beamed at the small pup. Ko looked up at the boy and then smiled at him with tears in his eyes. Thank you for giving me a name, he said. End flashback. The memory brought on a mix of emotions, some sad, some happy. He knew that whatever happened from now on, he had someone who would be with him even when he felt alone. As thoughts passed through his mind about what he was about to do, his family made him a bit apprehensive. I mean, it was one thing to go to his and Koga's special training spot, but to do what he was about to do would make any sane person think twice. At that moment he heard Ko's voice echo in his mind. You should try talking to them, maybe even tell them about me, it might make a difference, you know. The wolf Biju said as his presence could be felt in Naruto's mind. I don't think it will make a difference, besides who would believe me anyway? He responded mentally to his tenant's suggestion. I still think you should leave a note at least to let them know where you're going. Ko countered, plus if you want them to believe you, all you have to do is channel my chakra. He said, referring to the fact that in secret Naruto had been learning to control the chakra cloak that the young-tailed beast's presence inside his body granted him access to. The chakra that was produced by the cloak, unlike the fox's, was a viridian green color, and while it was not as corrosive as the fox's, it still hurt like heck. All that would do is make them ask too many questions, and they would get mad at me for not telling them. Naruto replied, besides bro, with what we are about to do, it's best that we just go. The young boy finished, having stopped along the way to pick up the pack that he had stashed at his and Koga's favorite training spot as he headed for his destination. I still don't like this plan of yours. It's called the Forest of Death for a reason. You know, most sane people try to avoid going in there. Ko commented on their destination. Look bro, we're going, and that is that. Naruto replied with a tone that told his adoptive brother that his mind was set and there was no changing it. You're nuts. Seriously, you have to be the craziest person I will ever meet. The young Biju shot back at the blonde boy. It's who I am and there is no changing it, you should know that by now. Came the blonde Jinchuriki's answer. That's what I am afraid of. Ko said as he was in no better way to say it, dragged along for the ride. Naruto just gave a mental laugh as he continued straight for his destination, unbeknownst to the two. Several blurs were following while trying to stay hidden. As it turned out, Ko had grown a lot in the time that the two had met, which led them to believe that through the seal, he was absorbing chakra, which led to the idea that as the boy continued to grow, so would his tenant, who already had 3 tails. This was not life-threatening, as for the fact that the boy had huge chakra reserves, not only due to the fact of being an Uzumaki but also being the son of a Jinchuriki as well. What they believed would happen was that Ko would continue to absorb chakra till he reached the level of the 9 tails, or that is what they thought would happen. To be honest, they really didn't know one way or the other. When he reached his destination, he stopped for a minute as he looked up at the gates that surrounded the ominous training ground 44, otherwise known to many as the Forest of Death. The name was only a name after all, but that still didn't mean it was safe. Far from it. In fact, that was why he had picked it for where he would go to train in seclusion, where he would hopefully find what he needed to get his family to acknowledge him as a member of their family. I still think this is a horrible idea, Ko said as the training ground loomed in front of them. Ko, are you a wolf or a mouse? Naruto questioned the Biju. The only thing we will have to worry about is Anko, who supposedly live here. Otherwise, the animals most likely will leave us alone because they can sense your chakra. Naruto said as prepared to go into the deadly forest. That doesn't mean that a few of them won't think twice about trying to make us their meal, and I for one plan on living well past the point of getting my 9th tail. Thank you very much. The wolf Biju responded. As this was going on, the 4 blurs had gotten close enough that both boy and beast could feel their signatures. Anbu, 4 of them, and one is Neko Oni-chan. Naruto surmised as he sensed them drew near. You mean that pretty Anbu girl with the cat mask? Ko perked up as Naruto shot a mental glare at his surrogate brother. Now is not the time or the place, Ko. Naruto replied. As the four shadows who had been following him for a bit now landed behind him, one stepped forward. Her hair was purple and long while she wore a white cat mask with red lines on it. Naruto, what are you doing here? It's late, and why come here of all places? The masked woman asked as she was puzzled by the youth's actions. I'm sorry, Oni-chan, but I need to be away from the village and my family for a while, he said, not looking back. Yugao was a little shocked to say the least. She knew both of his parents and knew about how things had been going at home, as well as how most of the village just ignored her favorite blonde, but she didn't think it was this bad. Naruto, please listen to me, she pleaded. Whatever is going on at home, you can talk to me about it. But right now, let's get you home. The blonde's eye glistened with tears at the mention of that word. Home? I wish that place did feel like home, much to the confusion of Yugao's team. But I'm not wanted or even needed there, since no one but Koga will even come near me. Yugao's eyes went wide at his statement. Please don't say things like that, Naruto, your family loves you. He turned to look at her and gave her a sad smile and brought his hands up to make a hand sign. Sorry, Nei-chan, he said, but this is something that I have to do, shadow clone jutsu, he called. To the surprise of all those standing there, in 9 plumes of smoke appeared 9 identical copies of Naruto. Nani? Shadow clones, but he's not even part of the academy yet, were the responses coming from her team. Naruto rubbed the back of his head as he gave a bashful smile. Yeah, me and Koga kinda broke into the vault where the forbidden scroll of sealing is kept and copied the directions for the jutsu, he said with a chuckle before looking back to Yugao. Tell mom and dad I don't hate them, or Menma, Narumi, Mito and Koga. Tell them despite everything that has happened I still love them all. He paused and looked down. And tell Koga I'm sorry. With that said, he did a chakra-infused jump with a lazy back flip that carried him over the fence and into the forest while his clones followed suit and bolted off into the forest. Shit, this is worse than bad. What do we do, Neko? One of the members of the group questioned as said Anbu member bit back a curse. She was well versed with the shadow clone jutsu and its uses, one of which was the ability to throw off pursuers by getting them to chase clones rather than the target you were after. Turning to the other members of her team, she snapped orders at them. Go get another team, and Anko, she will know this place the best and be able to guide you through some of the more dangerous parts, she said to one member and looked at the other two. Go in after him. If you find you're following a decoy, double back and pick up another trail. The two members looked at each other like she was out of her mind, feeling a large amount of killing intent directed at them, turning their heads slowly back to the source of said hostility. Neko's killer intent seemed to take the form of a giant cat ready to pounce on its prey. The two men also swore her eyes had turned red in that instant. If you two want to live past tonight, get in there and start following him, or I will cut your legs off at the knees and leave you for the predators of the forest to feast on, she said coldly. But where are you going? One of the two men asked as Yugao's eyes narrowed. To tell the Hokage, she responded. Now get moving. The two men with great hesitation took off into the forest, as Yugao turned about and ran full speed straight to the home of the Hokage to tell him the bad news. XXXX. Kushina Uzumaki was in the kitchen making dinner for the family with Mito helping her. As her thoughts went from one thing to the next, they came to one subject in particular. She remembered her oldest son as a sad expression crossed her face as she started to think about how much the family had been neglecting him. She even recalled how she and Minato had yelled at him after catching trying to do water walking and advanced chakra exercise. The words that she and her husband had said to him, along with the tone they had used, surely made her feel horrible. When she looked back on that day, she knew they had undoubtedly frightened the boy and made him feel hurt and confused. It was only after the event and she took a minute that she realized what they had done and recalled the look of fear and terror that had been on the young boy's face. Afterward, she went to go apologize. When she entered his room that night, what she saw made her regret every word she had said to the boy. Flashback. 1.5 years Naruto's room. Kushina walked up to the door to her eldest son's bedroom and turned the knob slowly, before opening the door. When she walked in, she noticed Naruto's bed was empty and began to panic, thinking the worst till she saw the mop of blonde hair on the other side of the room. Walking over to him, she froze when she saw the boy curled up in the corner of his room, legs tucked in tight to his chest with his arms wrapped around them like he was expecting to be hit by someone. Naruto, Kushina said quietly as she carefully walked forward and knelt down next to the boy. Naruto, she tried again as she reached out a hand and put it on the boy's shoulder, only to get no immediate reaction from him. See that her son was fast asleep, she walked to the bed and pulled the covers back. After which she knelt back down near the little boy and gingerly lifted him into her arms so as not to startle him awake. Laying him down gently on the bed, she removed his shoes and pulled the covers up over the boy. When she saw the tear stains on his cheeks, she felt disgusted with herself and Minato for treating the boy the way they had that afternoon and wished she had come to apologize sooner. Sitting lightly on the edge of the boy's bed, she lightly stroked the side of his face. "I'm sorry, Naruto," she said, still keeping her voice quiet so as not to wake him. "Your father and I didn't mean to overreact the way we did. We just..." She shook her head at what she was about to say and looked back at the boy. "No, there is no excuse for what we did. But please know that no matter what, we still love you and care about you just like we do the others, and that we would never let anything happen to you." She leaned down to kiss his forehead ever so lightly and looked down at the boy with the expression only a parent could make to show their love for their child. "I will talk to your father and we will try to be there for you more, especially me." She stood up and a lone tear ran down her cheek as she lightly brushed a stray bang of Naruto's from out of his face and a sad smile formed on hers. "Good night, my little maelstrom," she said, "I will always love you." With that she left the room, shutting the door quietly as to not wake her sleeping son. Flashback end. From that day on, Kushina tried to get closer to her son and be there for him, but just like before, that feeling of dread would come over her and she would wimp out to her everlasting shame. She had talked to Minato about what had happened and he agreed with her that what they had done was inexcusable and that they needed to make amends for how they acted. Once again though, when Minato tried to approach his eldest son, he felt the same fear that if he got close to his son things would go horribly wrong and he would walk away feeling defeated and like a failure as a father. Not only that, but the boy had become scarce and would seem to never be around. But as a mother she had resolved that the next time she approached her son she would not fail and would say what she had needed to say for some time. Her thoughts were disrupted when she heard her husband come in the front door and enter the kitchen. As he entered the room, he slumped into the chair he'd pulled out and sighed, muttering under his breath something about burning paperwork. "Long day?" Kushina asked, looking over her shoulder at Minato, who looked up at her with a tired expression on his face. "I swear it seems like every day there is more and more paperwork, even with Sarutobi's help. Sometimes I think that the council tries to find ways to make more paperwork just so they can get some kind of sick pleasure out of it when they see my face." Trying to hide the fact that she was finding amusement at her husband's misfortune by turning her head back around, she got herself under control and told him to get the kids for dinner. As Kushina turned off the stove, she moved to set the table. Just as she was finishing up, an urgent series of knocks at the front door were heard. "Hokage-sama, sensei, open the door," shouted the voice of Kushina's student Yugao, and from the way it sounded it was urgent. Heading to the front door, she was stopped by Minato. "Kushina, have you seen Naruto?" he asked. "I can't seem to find him. I checked all the rooms and none of the other kids seem to know where he is," Minato said, worry showing on his face. At this the rest of the kids entered the room only to wonder what was going on. "Sensei, open the damn door," Yugao shouted again, knocking even louder. When she opened the door, Kushina saw her former student standing in the doorway. Dressed in her standard Anbu uniform, the look on her face spoke volumes. Whatever it was urgent and she was pissed. "Yugao, what's wrong?" she asked. "It's Naruto," the purple kunoichi said, gaining the full attention of both parents and the kids, As a look of worry crossed both Minato's and Kushina's face, he went into training ground 44. The whole house was silent as if time itself had stopped, only for the silence to broken by Kushina. What? Kushina's scream was so loud that the whole village heard it. Heck, the whole land of fire probably heard it. Her eyes widening in horror and fear for her son. The forest of death. What is he even thinking going in there alone? Minato questioned, now terrified for his son. He felt that you didn't want him, and the best way to make everyone happy was to leave. Yugao said as her face showed angry and how worried she was, but he said to tell you that even with all that has happened he still loves you all. This news shocked them all. Even Menma was surprised by what his brother had done. You unwanted. Kushina thought. Naruto, you truly believe we didn't want you? She was broken out of her thoughts when Yugao continued. He also said to tell Koga he was sorry. This statement caused everyone in the room to look at the boy, who in turn held his hands up and stated that he had no idea about what his brother meant and that he had been trying to get Naruto to work things out with everyone else for some time. Yugao looked Kushina and Minato in the eyes before she asked the question, have either of you even talked to Naruto in the past few weeks or even paid any attention to what has been going on with him? To say she was aggravated would be an understatement. Most of the village ignores him while only a handful of people even acknowledge he even exists, and the people who are supposed to love him the most, seem to be too busy to even notice that he's hurting on the inside. Those words cut like a knife right through Kushina and Minato. Even though they were true, they had been keeping Naruto at arm's length when they should have gotten closer to the boy and tried to help. Kushina was about to respond when a hand was placed on her shoulder. When she looked at Minato, he shook his head before speaking. We can place blame and feel sorry for ourselves later. Right now our son needs us more than ever, he said, looking at his wife. Looking to the rest of her children, her resolve found. She told them, the four of you stay put, lock the doors and don't open them for anyone. Kushina said as she went to hers and Minato's room, coming back dressed in her Jonin ninja gear with her hair pulled back into a ponytail. She looked to Minato, let's go get our boy back. And with that said, the three of them ran off into the night to find Naruto. XXXX. Naruto was jumping from branch to branch as he traversed the tall trees of the infamous forest of death. Not much had happened so far, as his clones had done their job and drawn the attention of his tails, making it that much harder for them to track him. So far, he had yet to run into any of the creatures of the forest, much to his and Ko's relief. As he went deeper and deeper into the forest, he knew soon he would have to rest for the night. While the Uzumaki bloodline granted him large stamina reserves, he would have to rest sometime. Naruto knew about his bloodline from studying scrolls on his clan's heritage in the family library and learned about his family's unique abilities and other useful facts. While he had wanted to learn them from his parents, the knowledge he had gained through study would serve him well. But all that knowledge would be useless to him if he exhausted himself to the point of collapse. This Ko chimed in on his thoughts. We need to find a place to rest for the night. Even with your Uzumaki longevity, you will burn yourself out if you aren't careful. I know that, but first I need to find a place to rest that is secure, Naruto stated. Why not use one of the trees? It will keep yous away from predators and will allow us a high vantage point, Ko responded, thinking it was a good idea. No, that's way too obvious and will not help. We need to find somewhere that is hard to spot and can stand bad weather. I mean, we are going to be here for a while, so it only seems like a logical choice, Naruto countered. Heading deeper into the forest, he was hoping to find a cave that was hidden from view. While looking for a spot that he thought would be ideal, he was told to stop by Ko, who told him to turn back and head down to the forest floor. When he got to the spot his adoptive brother had mentioned, he saw an opening in the side of a small hill. It looked almost like a crescent moon but seemed like it was a dead end and was too easy to spot. But when he was about to leave, Ko told him to take a better look and that he would help. When Naruto looked again, this time Ko enhanced the boy's eyes as they changed to a lupine yellow, and Naruto saw what his friend was talking about. It was dark enough that when one looked at the hole it would look small and cramped, but with his enhanced vision, he saw that there was a small passage at the back which was hidden by the cave's layout. Following the passage, he found himself in a much bigger cave that led to what looked to be some kind of mural depicting wolves and what looked to be ninja fighting side by side in battle. This reminded Naruto of the Inazaka and their Ninken, but what he saw led him to think differently due to the depiction of a set of hand signs that Naruto thought he recognized as the summoning technique. Deeper in, he found a lone scroll that sat on a stone pedestal of sorts. Taking the scroll, he opened it and found that it was not just any old scroll but a summoning contract. Naruto read the scroll and found that it was the contract with the summoning wolves, which from what he saw and how much dust the scroll had gathered told him that there had not been a living user of this contract in a long time. After talking with Ko and making his choice, he signed the scroll with blood as was directed in the contract on the scroll. Deciding to try out the new technique, he bit his thumb and swiped it on his palm, making the proper hand signs and slamming his hand down. He called, summoning jutsu. A large plume of smoke filled the room, and when it dissipated, a large white wolf with a black diamond in the center of its forehead stood in its place. The wolf looked around the room, and when its eyes fell on him, he froze as said wolf growled and crouched down. Naruto thought he would be ripped apart by the summon. His mind racing, he was thinking about using a jutsu when Ko's voice was heard in his mind. Naruto, kneel down. His voice was urgent. What? Naruto responded, not knowing if he should fight or run. Kneel. This wolf is one of the matriarchs of the pack. If the scent I am getting is correct, kneel or she'll attack you. The tone in the Biju's voice said it was either that or get mauled. Taking his friend's advice, Naruto kneeled and lowered his head. The she-wolf quirked its head in curiosity and approached, sniffing. When it had finished, the she-wolf backed up and seemed like it was trying to figure something out. Then it spoke, asking him, "Who are you, young one, and why does your scent convey that of a human and wolf?" Naruto blinked before answering, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and I'm a Jinchuriki, if that helps answer your question," he said, never looking up for fear of her attacking him. The she-wolf seemed confused at the statement. As she looked the boy over, it was strange. She was old enough to know that there were only 9 Biju and none of them were wolves. Before she could ask what he was playing at, Naruto answered her unasked question. "If you are going to tell me that you don't know of any Biju that's a wolf, it's because he's a new Biju born from my chakra, the 9-tailed foxes, and that of a wolf who had some of its chakra absorbed by the sealing technique that was used." At this new information, she was even more confused. How could this be true? The boy had to be lying about what he claimed, but his scent was no lie, so how was it possible? If he were telling the truth, then it would explain how his scent was so abnormal. Naruto asked her, "If she will let you place a hand on her shoulder, I should be able to connect her to your mindscape so we can show her that you aren't lying, but she might say no, so don't be surprised if she turns you down or worse, threatens to take your hand off." Ko said, hoping that she would allow it. Not having any alternatives, Naruto took a chance and looked up at the she-wolf, swallowing. "If I may, my Biju says he might have a way to show you that I speak the truth, but in order to do so, he says that I would have to be touching you to do so. If you would allow me the chance, I will show you that what I say is true." The she-wolf thought for a second, then replied, "I do not know you well enough for that, young Naruto, but perhaps I can help both of us." With that said, the wolf started to approach Naruto, who lowered his head, and when she reached out, he thought he would have felt a paw, but he instead felt a human hand softly place itself on his shoulder. When he looked up, he saw a beautiful woman with snow-white hair and a black diamond mark on her forehead with what looked like wolf ears atop her head. She was dressed in a white kimono with black accents. The next thing Naruto knew, he was in his mindscape, and so was the beautiful woman who he had seen in the cave. Ko walked up next to Naruto, but when he didn't move or speak, Ko waved a tail in his face but got no response from his surrogate brother, who seemed to be broken. When he nudged Naruto, the boy fell over, having fainted in his own mindscape. The she-wolf women giggled as Ko commented, "Now there is something you don't see every day." You left him speechless. Not many people can say that. The beautiful woman walked over to Naruto and placed his head on her lap and waited for him to wake. As Ko laid down next to Naruto. When he woke, Naruto felt his head resting on something soft and opened his eyes to see the radiant face that had caused him to faint, looking at him with a smile before his brain could short-circuit again. She spoke in a voice soft and smooth like verbal silk. I know not many have seen this form, but like the summoning foxes, certain summoning wolves have a human form they can change into. She said as she gazed down on the boy. Sorry if it took you by surprise. No, that's not it, Naruto said as he looked at her. It's just that you're so beautiful I didn't know what to say or how to react. This comment caused the woman to blush and clear her throat. Well, yes, thank you, she said, looking to the other wolf in the room and asked, and what is your name, young Biju? Ko, he responded with a bow, and may I ask what your name is? My name is Usagi, she answered with slight bow of her own. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the forest, the sounds of what would have been thought to be a battle were going on as a group of ninja raced from branch to branch as a certain red-headed kunoichi was plowing her way through whatever was that got in her path. Get the hell out of my way! An angry and desperate voice shouted out, as a large Senkei fell to the ground with its head cut off. The voice belonged to none other than one Kushina Uzumaki as she cleaved her way through many of the vicious beasts in the forest that were foolish enough to get in her way. Following behind her were Minato, Yugao, and a handful of other Anbu, as well as the training ground's only human resident, Anko Mitarashi. They stayed back as Kushina, using a borrowed sword from one of the Anbu, sliced and diced or used any sort of jutsu on the unfortunate creatures that were either dumb enough or unlucky enough to get in her way. Oh man, even I know not to mess with an angry mother who is looking for her child, Anko said with a small hint of fear, as she watched as Kushina proceeded to beat a bear's skull in when it tried to swipe at her. Minato could only look on with worry and concern, seeing the state his wife was in. He knew she was desperate to find their son the same as he was, but he could also see that she was starting to fatigue and had used a lot of her chakra. He needed to do something, or else she would hurt herself. Kushina, please stop. We have to go back, he said, as she was now strangling another poor creature with her chakra chains before using them to slam it to the ground, and looked back at him with anger and pain in her eyes. I'm not leaving Naruto out here in this damn place. I'd rather rot in hell than go back without him, she argued, as she back-fisted a huge lizard that was about to attack her, making said reptile fall to the ground, its eyes having rolled back in its head. I want him back just as much as you do, Minato retorted, but if you keep overusing your chakra and pushing yourself in your current condition, you could end up killing yourself. Kushina could only narrow her eyes as she kept moving forward. By now all the creatures were hiding in fear from the redhead's wrath. You all can go back if you want, but I'm no she gasped out as she felt a chop to the back of her neck, her senses not warning her due to focusing all her attention on getting her son back and falling unconscious, only for Minato to flash forward and catch her. I'm sorry, sensei, but for Naruto's sake and the rest of your children I have to stop you, Yugao said, apologizing for her actions, as she sighed and turned to Minato, who had a solemn look on his face as he slung his unconscious wife over his shoulder. Come on everyone, he said, we'll continue looking for Naruto in the morning when we have better light. With that, the team of shinobi vanished as they departed the area. Minato's last thought being, Naruto, be careful and stay safe. XXXX. After a bit more conversation with the young boy, Usagi learned what had been happening with Naruto and what had brought him to the forest and why he was looking for a place no one would find him so he could train. With a bit more questioning, she also learned that the boy didn't crave power but wanted to improve to show those who around him that he was worth their time. Thinking it over for a bit and finally coming to a decision, she offered to take him back to where she was from so he could train under the wolves, which would be an improvement to training by himself with no instruction at all. The young boy agreed and was teleported back to where he had called her from. When he saw where they were, his mouth fell open. Before him was a large cave that as he was led through it he found that it was huge. In the center point of the cave was vaulted room with a skylight that let the moon shine through, giving a silvery glow to the room. "Welcome to Full Moon Cavern," Usagi said to the boy, leading him through the long tunnels to a room of sorts which would be his while he stayed and trained here. "Get some rest, you will meet the leader of the pack tomorrow," she said as she turned and left the boy to his sleep. Unrolling the sleeping bag he had brought with him and a comforter from home, he laid down only to sit up and rummage through his pack to grab a photo he had taken with him from a family photo album. It was of the family when Naruto and his siblings had just turned 6, the last time that they were a whole family, and things had been better. Sighing, he tucked the picture under his sleeping bag and put his head down on the small pillow he brought and let sleep claim him. His final thoughts before he drifted off were of when he was younger and how he hoped things could go back to the way they had once been. Naruto slept as the sun rose to shine through the skylight. The tunnels brightened as 4 young wolf pups pounced on him and licked him to death until he got up. He groaned as he managed to get the pups off of him. Okay, I'm up. As Naruto finished getting dressed, one of the 4 wolf pups bit his wrist and started dragging him through the corridors of the cavern with the other 3 pups chasing after them. As they went, Naruto swore he had the other wolves laughing as they passed by. When all was said and done, the pups had brought him to an area with a raised platform-like rock that had a large wolf with a moon-shaped scare on his left eye. He was much larger than the rest and conveyed an aura of power. As he looked down on the boy from his vantage point, he couldn't help but wonder what could have brought one so young here. "Young Naruto, I would like you to meet the alpha wolf of our pack, Taiyo," Usagi said as she walked up next to him. "It is a pleasure to meet you, young one, but if I may, what is it that has brought you here?" Taiyo asked. "I have come here to get stronger so that I may prove to my family that I am worth something and not just someone to ignore," Naruto said, looking down at his feet. Naruto told the large wolf the events that had led him here and why he was looking for a place to train. The whole time he spoke, Taiyo remained silent and took in all the facts that the boy told him. When he had finished, the large wolf rose and approached Naruto. As he did, Naruto bowed before Taiyo on one knee. Taiyo leaned in so he could get Naruto's scent, and as he did, his eyes went wide. He did indeed smell the scent of a biju. This information surprised the great wolf. He had been told by Usagi that the boy did indeed house a biju, but he had thought that it was some type of trick the boy had used to fool her, but this put things in a whole new perspective. Backing up to give the boy some space, he questioned the boy, "So you seek to become stronger for your family?" Naruto responded with a soft, "Yes," only to be greeted with a loud and heated reply. "Speak up, boy, a wolf doesn't cower when he speaks." Naruto looked up at the wolf with confusion in his eyes for only a second, as that changed to resolve as he answered, "Yes." "And what would you do with such power?" Taiyo asked pointedly. Naruto blinked. "What would I do if I had power?" He questioned mentally. It was a fair point. What would he do if he had power? Would he use it for the right reasons, or would he abuse such power? Would he do the right thing, or would it be better if he never had power like that so he couldn't use it to hurt others the way he had been? His thoughts went from one extreme to the next as he searched his mind for an answer. Suddenly a memory popped into his head of something that had been said to him when he was 6. Flashback. "What do you want to be when you grow up, Naruto?" Izumi Uchiha asked the 6-year-old boy. "I want to be a strong ninja just like my dad so I can beat up bad guys," Naruto answered. Izumi frowned at him. "Is that really what you want, or are you just trying to act tough?" she asked with a knowing smile. Naruto was surprised that she had figured out what he had been trying to do, and he looked away bashfully. "Naruto, you shouldn't fight only to hurt others. That isn't the reason you should be fighting for," she said, looking at him with that expression that Naruto always thought of as sisterly. "So then what should I fight for?" Naruto asked, looking up at her for the answer. "You should fight to protect what is important to you," Izumi answered. Naruto smiled and nodded his head. Okay, I will, and when I do, I will protect the village and the people who are precious to me. Izumi smiled back at the boy. You promise? She questioned, holding out her pinky. Naruto reached out with his pinky and locked it around hers. Promise. End flashback. Thanks, Izumi-chan. Naruto, though, as he looked the great wolf dead in the eyes and proclaimed, I would use it to protect the things that are important to me. I would use it to fight those who try to hurt others and to prove that I am worth something and am not to be ignored. Seeing the young boy's determination, he smiled and nodded his head. Taiyo then detailed the cavern and where Naruto could and couldn't go, mainly for the boy's safety, such as Naruto was restricted from going to the nursery, due to that area being where the newborn pups were. He nodded in understanding at that, knowing a pregnant wolf giving birth was more protective and dangerous, and would kill him without a single shred of hesitation. Taiyo told him that if he was going to get stronger, he would need to learn from them. This included more than just fighting and defending himself, it also entailed chakra control and chakra nature exercises and study, along with understanding the basics of how jutsu were performed. The training was grueling and hard. At times he even thought about quitting, but he learned and grew stronger as time passed, one thought driving him forward: I will prove my worth to them. That was 4 years ago, as Naruto was 12 now and a lot stronger than he had been before he arrived here. Throughout that time, Naruto had many thoughts about what would happen when he went home. Would things have changed? Would they go back to the way they were before? One thing was for certain: if nothing changed, then he would be better off not going back at all. The one thing he couldn't take was being ignored, not again. Hate, he could take that. Fear, he could take that as well. Loathing, he could take that too. But to be utterly ignored, to be seen but not heard, to be looked at like he was a stranger in his own village, an outsider among the people he grew up around, he could never go through that again. It would be a fate worse than death in his book. As he was going through a set of katas for the taijutsu style the wolves had taught him, he stopped when he saw a lone person approaching him. He smiled as she drew close and he bowed to her when she stopped, which she returned. Usagi-chan, what can I do for you? Naruto asked the she-wolf. Taiyo-sama sent me to tell you it is time for you to return home. She said as he looked at her, surprised that the great wolf thought he was ready. He also wishes to speak with you before you go. Naruto had been wondering when this day would come as he and Usagi made their way to the area with the raised platform like rock. When they arrived, Taiyo stood upon said platform looking at the young boy who had grown so much in the time he had been here. The time has come, young Naruto. I believe that you are ready to return to your village. Taiyo said. I don't know if I can. What if things haven't changed at all? What if my family still treats me like a stranger? Naruto was saying, only to be cut off by the large wolf. Are you a wolf or are you prey? You came here to train and make yourself stronger, to prove your worth so you could protect those important to you, or was that all just a lie? Taiyo challenged. No, I meant every word I said. Naruto replied, a slight heat to his tone. Then stand up for yourself and show them that you have changed. Show them the fruits of your labor and prove your worth to them, Taiyo said, his booming voice echoing around the space, looking the boy straight in the eye as he continued. Go now, Naruto Uzumaki, wolf's blood Namikaze, and show them that the lone wolf walks alone no longer. With that, Naruto bowed and thanked the wolves for letting him stay with them to train and left to return home. XXXX. It was quiet in the home of the fourth Hokage and his family. Minato was at the tower doing his duty as leader of the village, while the kids were at the ninja academy preparing for their graduation in a few months. So, that meant the only person in the house was Kushina, who was standing by the window looking outside, toward the forest of death. A solemn look etched on her face. It had been 4 years since her son left. Out of hurt, neglect and sadness. When the news about Naruto running into the forest was spread around town, you would have thought that there would have been more people wondering what happened to bring this about, but it seemed that life in the Leaf Village didn't even notice that he was gone. There were the odd few who had been close to the boy who came round telling her that he would come back, but Kushina had a hard time believing that. While it was a small comfort that they had faith in the boy, it still didn't heal the wounds in Kushina's heart. Ever since the night Naruto had run away, she had been having nightmares no more like night terrors about Naruto being killed in grisly ways, Naruto asking why she hated him. The worst of which had been the night he ran away. Night terror flashback. Kushina's eyes snapped open as she found herself back in the living room of her family's house, only the strange thing is, the whole place was colored monochrome, while only she was in color. The confused woman looked at her hands, a look of utter shock on her face. What's going on? Where am I? She thought to herself, but her thinking was cut off as she began to hear voices. One she immediately recognized as Minato's, and the other was hers, and by the sound of it they were yelling at someone. All of a sudden it hit her as fear overcame her. Her eyes widened and she ran for the kitchen. When she saw the calendar and her heart sank. She remembered this date all too well. No, please not again. Not again, she thought, as the yelling outside intensified. She then bolted for the back door and opened it. To her horror she saw herself, Minato, and Naruto in the backyard, with the latter looking terrified as tears ran down his whiskered cheeks. You stupid little bastard. What were you thinking using an advanced chakra exercise without our permission? The Minato yelled at Naruto. Biba-2-chan. Aye, the younger blonde said, only to receive a hard slap from Kushina. That's enough out of you. I can't believe a little shit like you would try to pull a stunt like this. The past Kushina screeched, making the present Kushina wince at the words, as tears leaked from her eyes and fell down her cheeks. No. Stop this. Please stop. She begged to any deity out there to stop this torture, only for it to fall on deaf ears as the two specters of herself and her husband continued to shout at Naruto, who was now curled up in a ball crying. Then, to her confusion and unease, a sinister grin formed on the mouths of herself and Minato. It's obvious that this little shit stain doesn't know his place, said the past Kushina while the past Minato nodded in agreement. Yes, and we know what happens to brats like him, he said, while the real Kushina looked on, clearly confused by the scene unfolding before her. Wait. This is not right. We sent Naruto to his room. Kushina thought, as past Minato pulled out one of his Hiraishin kunai. And it's not like anyone would care. The whole village already ignores him, so they won't even notice he's gone, said Kushina's past self, and her eyes widen in horror at that. Before a thought could enter her mind, her supposed past self unleashed her chakra chains, and strung Naruto up by the neck, while spreading his arms and legs out. His face now showing true fear as he looked at the two of them. K-Ka-chan. T2-chan. Please, Naruto begged, his voice strained, but the grins on their faces only turned more cruel. Sorry, Naru-chan, but we never wanted you. We have your brothers and sisters after all. The other Kushina said with a sickly sweet voice, and then another chakra chain shot out of her back and the kunai tip went speeding at the 6-year-old, piercing him in the shin. This resulted in the little boy screaming out in pain. The real Kushina looked in horror at what just happened. The horror evident on her face at what just happened. No. This is wrong. This is all wrong. The Uzumaki screamed at herself, this isn't what happened. She then saw Minato fling his signature kunai behind Naruto, before disappearing in a yellow flash, and reappearing behind Naruto, a familiar spiraling ball of chakra in hand. Rasengan. Minato called, slamming the chakra ball into Naruto's back, causing said boy to cry out in agony. No. Stop it. Kushina screamed as she tried to help her son, only for something to grab her ankles and make her stumble. She looked down and saw what looked like black vines wrapped around her ankles. She reached for her kunai pouch but found nothing as it was gone. Desperation taking hold as she clawed at the vines, trying to get free to save her child from this torture. Let go of me. She roared. She then heard another scream and whipped her head back. Her eyes widened as another chakra chain impaled itself into Naruto's other shin, then two more to his forearms. Panic settled in as the red habanero now struggled more than ever to get to Naruto, but then another black vine shot forward and grabbed her wrist and yanked it back. Kushina then watched as the past Kushina turned into an ugly twisted version of herself, as her skin became horribly burned, her red hair in a greasy mess, her teeth became sharpened needles, and her eyes a bloodshot demonic yellow, as the same thing happened to the past Minato. Then, two ninjutsu swords sprouted from the ground, their blades, rusted and old. Now for the finishing touch, the now demonic version of Kushina said as she took hold of the sword and yanked the blade out of the ground, with the demonic version of Minato following suit. Yes, time to put this bad dog to down. For good. With that he stabbed the blade into Naruto's stomach, forcing a strangled cry of pain from the young blonde. Then the demon Kushina proceeded to skip toward the chain-bound boy. "Oh Naru-chan, Naru-chan," the demon Kushina said in sickly sweet voice, as the real one continued to struggle, as she watched what was happening. "If only you've been a good boy, you wouldn't be having this punishment." Kushina could only growl as this thing spoke to her son with her voice. But what the demon Kushina said next made her blood freeze. "Now, you die," and with that simple phrase, she rammed the ninjutsu into Naruto's neck, said boy choking on his blood as his eyes went blank. The look of horror on Kushina's face was clear as she saw her precious child die in front of her. "No," she screamed just as the vines, the chakra chains, and the twisted versions of herself and Minato vanished, as Naruto hit the ground. The distraught mother immediately rushed over to her son and scooped him up into her arms. Tears cascading from her eyes as she looked at his small unmoving body. The world around them dissolving to an empty darkness. "Naruto, Naruto," Kushina wailed, as she tried to wake him, but with no results as his eyes were rolled back, and lifeless. The mother, seeing no response, cradled her son's body, while rocking back and forth, racking sobs coming from her throat. "Naruto, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," she choked out, in complete utter despair. "Why?" a little voice rasped, causing Kushina to jerk her head up and look around, only to hear raspy breathing coming from her supposed dead child. Looking down at Naruto, her eyes widened in horror as she saw his face, which was pale and lifeless as he looked at her with those dead eyes. "Why do you hate me?" With those words uttered, the now talking core of Naruto turned to dust in Kushina's arms as the question it had asked started to repeat itself over and over, using Naruto's voice. As the voices grew louder and louder, they blended together and reached a crescendo. It was like 1,000 nails on a chalkboard. As she begged them to stop, only for them to laugh at her misery. She could only take so much before she screamed at the top of her lungs for them to stop. As she now saw Naruto standing before her, as his skin paled and his eyes were empty, lifeless orbs looking at her, he asked her again, but in a voice that sounded like a demon's. "Why do you hate me?" Night terror end. Kushina jolted awake screaming, sweat covering her entire form and drenching her clothes. She saw she was in hers and Minato's bedroom at home. Remembering the horrifying night terror she curled up into a ball against the head of the bed, as several sets of footsteps were heard, and the door flew open, revealing a concerned Minato. "Kushina, are you alright?" the fourth Hokage said worriedly as himself, Yugao along with two other people, which were Hiruzen Sarutobi and another Anbu with a raccoon mask, entered the room. They watched as Minato headed over to his wife, who looked as if she had seen the Shinigami himself. Kushina, talk to me," Minato said gently as he carefully tried to place a hand on her shoulder, which resulted in her jerking her head up and back, pedaling until she was up against the wall. "Kushina, calm down, it's me," Minato said as he moved toward his wife, which seemed to scare her more. Knowing he had to do something fast, he moved forward and grabbed the clearly distraught Uzumaki, who began to struggle, thrash around, the distress evident on her face. "Shish, Kushina, shish," the blonde said calmly as he repeated the process until she calmed down. Kushina then hugged her husband and began sobbing, "It's okay, Kushina. Now, tell me what happened." Kushina could only cry more as she remembered the horrible scene that had played out in her mind just moments ago. See, can't It was so horrible, she said between her sobs, and Minato turned to the other Anbu. Go get Inoichi, now. Tell him it's an emergency, and that I need him here right away. Minato ordered. The Anbu member who nodded vanished in a shunshin. It was at this moment that the other 4 Uzumaki Namikaze children came into the room, concerned over their mother. Only for Hiruzen to stop them as he shook his head. Your mother just had a nightmare, you 4. The retired Hokage said, it would be best if you didn't disturb her right now. End flashback. Kushina remembered how Minato had puked after Inoichi had shown him what his wife had seen in her dreams. Minato had comforted her, saying that they would never do that to Naruto, that they loved him. Yes, we have made mistakes, but we can be better and help our boy when he comes home. We will do what we should have done all those times we failed. We just need to be there for him when he does come home. Minato had said to her, trying to lift her spirits. But her dreams had not seemed to stop or get any less horrifying. After one of those terrible nights, she attempted suicide, only to be stopped by her best friend, Makoto Uchiha. She then was placed on suicide watch for half a year until she was deemed stable with help from her family and therapy sessions with Inoichi. A few tears leaked from her eyes, as she thought about the child she foolishly neglected and left in alone, all because she couldn't overcome her own weakness. Even though Yugao told them he didn't hate her or the rest of the family, Kushina knew that Naruto would never trust them again, especially her. She had spent a lot of time in her eldest son's room, either making sure it was kept neat for when or if he came home, or breaking down and crying. Naruto, she thought, I'm such an awful mother. She heard a knock on her door and stood up. I'll be right there, she said softly, but loud enough for the person on the other side of the door to hear her as she wiped the tears from her eyes. When she opened the door, she smiled, as there on the other side was none other than Makoto Uchiha, her best friend from her genin days. Hey Makoto, how are you today? She asked, as she smiled at her friend. Makoto gave Kushina a smile in return, but could see her friend's smile didn't reach her eyes. And she knew why. Hello Kushina, I just came over to see how you were doing and how you were holding up, she said, and watched as Kushina unconsciously rubbed her wrists. I've been fine Makoto, really. I'm not planning on offing myself anytime soon, Kushina said in a vain attempt at humor, while Makoto sighed. Kushina, said Uzumaki, chuckled nervously as she scratched the back of her head, knowing nothing escaped her best friend. Makoto could only shake her head. She knew that Naruto running away was hard on her, and she was now becoming even more desperate, her hope that she would see him again diminishing with every day. He will come back, Kushina. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he will come back, I promise you that, she said, while Kushina sighed as she led her friend to the living room of the house. I wish I was more confident about that, said the depressed mother. But how would I know that he doesn't hate me for I've done XXXX? Well, here we are, said Naruto as he stood on the head of his father looking over the village he left 4 years ago. Yep, the village hasn't changed much. That's for sure, said Ko, who was also looking at the village through Naruto's eyes, seeing that mostly it had stayed the same. Said Blonde nodded at his tenant said. Well, let's go meet the old man, Naruto said before he started to make his way to the Hokage's tower. On the way to his father's office, he stopped by Ichiraku's for a bite to eat. As he walked through the curtain that separated the outside from the inside of the little shop, he took a seat at the counter and looked at a menu. Ayame came out from the back and saw that a customer was waiting. How may we help you? She trailed off as the blonde lowered the menu and ordered. Yeah, let me have one miso pork ramen, Naruto said as the girl just stared at him, having dropped her pen before she could write down his order. Ayame couldn't believe who she was looking at. There was no way, but here he was sitting at the counter. It wasn't possible. She had had this daydream before and rubbed her eyes just to make sure it was not her hallucinating again. When she looked up there, he was still sitting there looking at her. He cocked his head slightly, looking a bit worried. Ayame-chan, are you okay? Naruto questioned. Naruto. Ayame squealed as nearly jumped over the counter to hug him. What has you so excited, Ayame? Tsuki questioned coming in from the storeroom. Only to freeze mid-stride. Is that Naruto? He exclaimed and came around the counter to shake the young blonde's hand. When did you get back? Ayame questioned, smiling at him the whole time. Just a little while ago. Naruto answered. Have you gone to see your family yet? Tsuki asked. They have been worried sick waiting for you to come back ever since you left. He continued. When I heard that you had run into the forest of death, I thought you had died in there, but here you are safe and sound. Ayame said as she hugged him again, which he tried to worm his way out of. I'm fine, Ayame-chan, he reassured her. Oh, right about that ramen. Naruto asked only for Tsuki Simli. Right, this one's on the house to mark your safe return home. He said as he passed the bowl to Naruto, who ate it with gusto. After saying his goodbyes to the both of them, he continued on to the tower where his father would be working to run the village. Minato sighed as he read another document that needed to be signed. Although he had asked Sarutobi to help be an aid to him, there was still plenty of paperwork to go around. How Sarutobi-sama survived this bullshit without help, I will never know. He thought to himself. But one thing is for sure. I'm not going to sign some bullshit that gets Naruto banished or labeled a missing nin. It had been a grueling 4 years for Minato and his family when his son, Naruto, ran away from home and into Training Ground 44, or the Forest of Death. He had been sending Anbu search parties in there to find him, but they all came back exhausted, banged up, and empty-handed. Then there was his wife's attempted suicide, which was thankfully prevented by Makoto, who had been on her way over and had caught her before Kushina could kill herself. And to top it all, there had been whispers that a group of Rouge ninja calling themselves the Akatsuki had been causing problems along the border with the Hidden Rain. He sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. Things were getting hectic with each year. But, despite all this, the one thing that had him most edgy was his son. He cursed himself due to his lack of will to overcome his fears and talk with his son to be there for the boy when he needed it most. Now, his son would undoubtedly hate him, and there was nothing he could do about it. His thoughts were interrupted as he heard a knock on the door. Enter. Minato said as the captain of the Leaf Police Force entered his office. Hokage-sama. Fugaku said, bowing. Minato smiled, motioning for him to sit. Asking for tea to be brought for them, Minato turned back as he asked. To what do I owe the pleasure of you coming to see me today? I would like to talk to you about the unrest that has been growing in the Uchiha clan's ranks, he said as he accepted the cup of tea that had been handed to him by the assistant who left the room after setting down Minato's cup on his desk. There have been whispers about a possible coup attempt to replace you with me as Hokage. He finished taking a sip of his tea. So, you would like me to step in and use my power as Hokage to put a stop to it, is that it? Minato asked Fugaku point blank. Not so directly, Fugaku commented. I have called a clan meeting that will take place in 4 days' time, and I would like you to be there to help get the point across. Fugaku, you know that I can't interfere with clan affairs unless there is proof to support the claim. Minato stated, knowing that the meeting was for clan members only. I am not asking you to interfere in any way. I would like you to be there as an olive branch to show the members of my clan that they have a choice: either put the good of the village first or place themselves above the village and accept the consequences that come with their actions. Fugaku replied. So, you want me to be there to help make your point clear? Minato questioned. Yes, Fugaku said as he rose and walked to stare out the window. Your being there would not only help get the point across, but it would also help many of the clan members know that I would rather resolve the matter peacefully than with force. Minato shook his head as he looked at the caption of the Leaf Police Force. As the conversation between the two men went on, it changed subjects and eventually landed on the topic of their families. So how is your family doing? Minato asked Fugaku, who just med before replying. Things are going well for the most part. Itachi is doing well in his role in the Anbu, and Makoto is doing fine as well along with my daughter Setsuna, He paused to take a sip of tea as he continued, but my youngest Sasuke wants to progress to fast for his own good. He seems to think that because he is an Uchiha he should be stronger due simply to that fact alone. Much like many of my clan, this arrogance will be his downfall and that of the clan if something is not done. Minato nodded, knowing full well that many in the Uchiha look down on others simply for the fact that they belong to the clan and seem to think themselves superior to others. And in some ways they were right, but in many more they were wrong. Just because they had the Sharingan it didn't make them any better than anyone else. They still had to work hard and train their skills just like anyone else. Having a Kekkei Genkei didn't make the ninja, it was what one did with this power that showed her worth. His heart is in the right place, but his mindset and pride are holding him back. If he would only realize this. Fugaku sighed and smiled. How are things going with your own family? He asked. This made Minato sink in his chair a bit, knowing that things were not going well with his family and it was his fault for not seeing how much pain his son was in as well as his being a coward. It's been a long and hard 4 years, Minato sighed, sipping his tea. Mito blames herself for Naruto leaving and keeps saying that if only she had been nicer to him he would have stayed. Narumi on the other hand keeps waking up in the middle of the night and going to Naruto's room only to find it empty and will cry herself to sleep in his bed. And you already know what has been going on with Kushina, he said, looking down at his desk. What about Menma and Koga? Fugaku asked, hoping that there was some good news. Koga has been trying to get the girls to stop blaming themselves because it won't bring Naruto back any sooner, and Menma seems the least bit concerned, saying that Naruto caused this problem, he can fix it himself. Minato paused, sighing before he went on. I mean, I knew that they were not on the best of terms, but I didn't know it had gotten this bad. You know he will be back. It may take some time, but your son will come back. Fugaku stated, making Minato look at him. I wish I shared your optimism, Minato said, shaking his head, but no one has seen any trace of the boy since he went into the forest, and the Anbu who go to look for him keep coming back empty-handed and worse for wear. It's not my optimism, it's the fact that my wife believes it and I have learned to trust her instincts over the years when it comes to these things. He nodded, continuing, he will be back, he is your son after all. Before the conversation could go any further, a commotion outside the office interrupted them. Young man, I told you. The Hokage is in a meeting right now. The guard said adamantly. I don't care what you say, you flat-chested weasel. A young voice shot back. Who are you calling flat-chested, you little punk? You. Now out of my way, I am going in to see him and I don't have time to mess around with you. Release the. Before the order could be completed there was a shout of, wind-style great breakthrough. The door flew back as it was ripped from its hinges as it and the body of the guard flew through the doorway, crashing into Minato's desk as the door broke in two on impact, the top half coming down to clock the guard in the head. Fugaku had managed to get out of the way in time, but only just, prompting himself, Minato and the Anbu guarding Minato to jump into taijutsu stances. The two men looked at the individual who caused the disturbance as he walked in. Minato caught sight of him and his eyes widened as he was looking at a miniature version of himself when he was a genin. Though the jacket was in a different color. Minato couldn't help but gape like a fish as he stammered out the name of his guest. Naruto. Minato couldn't believe his eyes as he saw his son standing right in front of him. He also saw Naruto had grown well for being in such a hostile place and could tell the amount of training he had put himself through. Minato looked into his son's eyes and saw they were the eyes of a dedicated shinobi, but in those deep blue eyes he found he almost lost himself in the nearly emotionless eyes. Despite this, due to years of training, he did manage to read a small bit of emotion in those eyes. He saw pain and sadness mixed with determination and something he couldn't place. Hey old man, surprised to see me? Fugaku also stared, only to mutter, speak of the Kyuubi. And you will hear its roar. Minato said, finishing Fugaku's statement. Fugaku Oji-san, it is good to see you. I hope everything is well with you and Makoto Oba. Naruto said with all the respect he had. Naruto learned a long time ago that Fugaku was big on respect, and this prompted him to show as much as possible so as not to get on his bad side. This earned a small smile from the man, which was an achievement all by itself. It is thank you for asking, Naruto oi. He replied. Naruto. Minato began to say, only to be cut off. I'm here to sign up for the academy, if I'm not too late, that is. Naruto said, wanting to avoid talking to his father for the time being. He had forgiven him and the rest of the family besides Koga, who he didn't have a problem with, but he was still not just going to let the rest get close, they would have to earn that. Minato was silent for a few moments, his son's casual interruption shocking him, before he managed to find his voice. Why, yes. But, Naruto, you have to tell me what happened to you in the forest, and how no one could find you in there even though we combed the whole forest. He said, hoping his son would open up just a little. I'll tell you once I feel like I can trust you. Naruto said as his blank expression turned into a frown, causing Minato to wince at that, and the Anbu to tense. Will you come back home at least? Minato asked, hopeful that his, now estranged son would at least come back to the house. I might, said Naruto, as he looked his father dead in the eyes, as long you don't try to pry into what happened while I was gone or have me watched by Anbu, I will tell you when I feel you have earned it. Minato sighed and nodded. All right, but you should talk with your mother. Your departure was hard on her. Heck, it has been hard on all of us. He said. Naruto didn't even flinch one bit, which caused Minato to worry a bit. However, unknown to Minato, Naruto mentally did flinch at the news. She took it that bad. Kami, I'm such an idiot. Still, I can't trust them yet. They need to earn my trust. He thought, as Ko answered him. And that's why I told you to leave them a note. The new Biju said, while Naruto mentally glared at his partner. Zip it, moron, he said, and Ko could only sigh. One of these days, Naruto, you're going to do something that you will forever regret. He thought, being careful as to not let Naruto hear his thoughts. All. Try to talk with her. But know that she is in the same boat as you. Mito, Narumi and Menma are not off the hook either, but I will try to patch things with them up, however that will be up to them too, not just me. Naruto said, while Minato nodded, glad that Naruto was going to try and make things better with his siblings. I understand that, son. He said, as opened a desk drawer and brought a piece of paper and began to write into it. This note will let you into the class Koga and the others are in. Give it to the instructor Iruka Yumino, he's a good person. I know you'd want to graduate with the rest of the students your age. Naruto nodded as he approached the desk and accepted the letter from Minato. After he wrote down the instructions on what Iruka was supposed to do, he placed his seal on it and gave it to Naruto. I'll see you at home later, then. Minato said while Naruto nodded as he turned around and left the office through the destroyed doorway. Minato let out a sigh he didn't know he was holding as he looked at the still out cold guard and the door on the floor of his office. Please get him, and whoever else was hurt outside, to the hospital, and have some janitors fix the door. He ordered, and the Anbu nodded as they gathered up the unconscious man and anyone outside who was knocked out to the hospital. I told you never doubt my wife when it comes to these things. Fugaku said, looking at Minato with a slightly smug expression. Minato laughed at the statement, saying, I'll have to remember that. I'm gonna have to work hard to get Naruto to trust me again, he thought, as he looked back to his paperwork, sighing to himself. But, if things go smoothly, I can atone for the mistakes I made. XXXX. Mito Uzumaki Namikaze yawned as she listened to her class instructor drone on and on about the history of Konoha, which she heard 5 different times. It was nice hearing the history of your home once or twice, but Iruka-sensei was a person who made it boring. She felt like she was about to pull her red hair out in frustration if she continued to listen to Iruka's long-winded lectures. Heck, she knew that her brothers and sister had to be feeling the same as her right now. Sweet Kami-sama, help us all. Please give us a distraction so that we don't have to listen to this torture. At that moment, a knock was heard at the door of the classroom, making Iruka stop his lecture so he could answer the door. Thank you. Mito mentally shouted with glee as she cried anime tears of happiness, however her expression then turned to surprise as she saw the person on the other side enter, and then morph into shock. Naruto. She couldn't believe her own eyes as she saw standing by the door of the classroom, was her brother Naruto. Even though it had been 4 years, she still remembered him. However, this shock wasn't just hers alone as the other 3 Uzumaki Namikaze siblings had similar reactions. Excuse me, is this room 23A and are you Iruka Yumino-sensei? Naruto asked, and said Chunin instructor blinked in confusion. Yes, that's right. Iruka said. How can I help you? Naruto walked up toward the academy teacher and handed him the note that his father gave him. Iruka took the note, opened it, and read the contents before his eyes widened, which quickly turned into a smile. Well, Naruto-san, I must say welcome back from your training, he said, while said blonde nodded. Now if you would take a seat next to, let's see, you can sit next to Hinata. Said girl, after hearing that, began to blush at that, as Naruto nodded and made his way toward the Hyuga heiress. Hello Hinata, it's nice to meet you. Naruto greeted as he sat down next to her. The shy, Hyuga didn't say anything, but nodded her head. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle a bit. Relax, I won't bite, he said cheerfully, as he placed his hand on her shoulder, making her blush like a tomato. Watching this was a boy with brown shaggy hair covered by a hood with a puppy in it, with brown slitted, fang-shaped tattoos, and feral features growled as he glared at the blonde's actions on the Hyuga heiress. This was Kiba Inuzuka, the heir of the Inuzuka clan. When he took one sniff of the blonde, he felt in his bones he was a threat to his role as the alpha male. And this made him feel on edge. He wasn't the only one, as Sasuke Uchiha also felt uneasy by the aura that the blonde was giving. Shikamaru Nara had a look of boredom on his face but in fact was studying Naruto. Shikamaru and his friend Choji had tried to be friends with the blonde when he had been younger, but now it was like looking at a whole new person. He wasn't the only one studying Naruto, as Shino Aburame was looking at the prodigal son of the Hokage and his friend as he was conversing with another of his few friends. Okay everyone, Iruka said, the Hokage has assigned a new student to this class. He has been on a training trip with one of the bodyguard detail. So, why don't you stand up and introduce yourself? Naruto nodded and stood up. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, he said, much to the surprise of almost everyone there. My likes are ramen, my friends, and training. My dislikes are hypocrites, abusers, kidnappers and the like. My plans for the future are to become a great ninja and start a family. My dream is to show the villagers and show my family I'm worth something. Mito and Narumi both winced at the statement, hearing that was like a stab to the heart. While Menma just looked at him with slight frown. Koga on the other hand was smiling to himself that his brother had come home safe and that he was not just lying to his sisters this whole time. Iruka nodded and smiled a bit. Thank you, Naruto, he said. You can sit down now. Naruto nodded and sat back down, as Iruka continued with his lecture. The rest of the school day went by quick as the students left the academy. Naruto was heading for the gate, after talking with Hinata, until a gruff voice got his attention. Hey! Naruto turned, and there stood the Inuzuka heir, giving him a death glare. Yeah, how can I help you? Naruto said blandly. This made Kiba's glare turn more intense, if it could get more intense that is. Stay away from Hinata, he said, and the blonde rose an eyebrow at that. Why? What do you care who I talk to? Naruto said, and the Inuzuka heir's face became red with anger at that. Just shut up and stay away from her. He shouted, and attempted to march at him, but stopped and became unnerved as the look in Naruto's eyes made him feel as if he was looking into the eyes of a predator. I wouldn't shout at me if I were you, he said warningly in a somewhat too calm. I don't take kindly to people who try and attack me. The Inuzuka just glared at Naruto before giving a humph and storming off. Naruto sighed as he shook his head, knowing that the rivalry between the two of them was born from the same one dogs and wolves had, even if the Inuzuka boy didn't know it. While dogs were loyal to their masters and would die to protect them, wolves had no masters, and were loyal only to the pack, and looked after one another like family. In Naruto's view, dogs and wolves were like samurai in a way. The dogs were the ones who served a lord until their last breath, while wolves were more like Ronin, and fought hard to earn a living to feed their family. Who does that mud even think he is? Ko questioned. Naruto sighed as he responded, just let it go. Aniki. Naruto blinked as he looked and saw his sisters Mito and Narumi approaching him, with a nervous looks on their faces, like if they said the wrong word, he would hit them. But Naruto wasn't the type of guy to hit a girl, least of all his own twin sisters. Yes, Mito Imouto? He asked, and his twin sisters both fiddled with their hands before one managed to speak up. Anyo, would you like to? Narumi tried to say but was cut off by Naruto. Walk home with you too. He finished for her, and they nodded as both of them looked to the ground. Naruto sighed as he shook his head. Why not? Their heads perked up at this. As Narumi tried to glomp onto his arm only for him to sidestep, much to Narumi's disappointment. But, he said with a raised hand looking between the both of them. I want you both to know that you are going to have to work to regain my trust. Don't think that things are going to be fine right away. They both deflated somewhat at that, as they both knew that they had been part of the reason he had left, but this time they didn't feel like he was a stranger. In fact, that feeling that they would always get was almost all but gone. They both nodded as they moved to stand beside their brother, as they thought, things are going to be different this time. The three siblings then left the academy grounds together, heading in the direction of their home. After a few minutes of walking, the three siblings were stopped by Koga, who was jogging to catch up with them. When he reached them, he looked at Naruto. He was so different, but at the same he was the same as when he left. Koga had some things that he needed to say, and he didn't want his sisters around to hear what he had to say. Hey, can you two give us a minute? Koga asked, looking to both sisters as he passed Mito some Ryo. Why don't you get some popsicles, one for each of us, while I talk to Naruto? The girls nodded and asked what flavor both of them wanted. Orange is fine, Naruto replied. Green please, Koga said, and with that the two girls left. Koga just looked at Naruto for a few seconds before Naruto spoke. You have something you wanted to say? Naruto asked, looking at his brother. You look good for where you have been the past 4 years, he said. It's good to see you after all this time. Same to you, Naruto responded. Sorry about all of this. I know you said I should try and fix things with everyone here, but I just didn't see how to do that. Koga sighed. I know why you left, but you could have left a note or something. I mean, heck, anything would have been better than just up and leaving the way you did. I told you that you should have left one, but do you ever listen to me? Nope. Ko stated, only for Naruto to fire back for him to zip it. All I want to know is that you are back and don't plan on running away again. He said. I don't think anyone will be able to take it. Heck, things are bad enough already if it happened again. Koga trailed off for a second before continuing. I don't want to think about what would happen. As the conversation went on, Koga filled Naruto in on everything that had happened since he left, to say that what had been going on shocked Naruto was about par for the course today. When he got to the end, Koga asked, do you remember what I told you about what happened after you got yelled at for trying to water walk by yourself? Naruto remembered it had been what had kept him from running away sooner than the had. Koga had told him that he had seen their mother tuck Naruto into bed and tell him that she was sorry for everything they had said, and said that she and Minato truly did love him. This statement had given him hope that things would get better, but when things stayed the same as they had been for a while, he finally gave up. Yes, I remember, he replied. Well, now you know it's true. It just took you running away to make everyone see just how much they needed you. At this, Narumi and Mito rounded the corner with the popsicles in hand. Mito asked if everything was okay as they walked up. At this the brothers nodded and the four siblings went on their way. It had been 20 minutes since they left the academy and finished their frozen treat until they arrived at the front gate of their home, and after passing through it, they stopped at the front door. Naruto took a deep breath, knowing this will be the moment of truth of how his mother will react when she sees him. Koga, seeing his brother's hesitation, placed his hand on his shoulder. Narumi and Mito stepped up next to him and both told him it's okay, we're here for you. Well, it's bound to happen sooner or later, he thought as he stepped up to the door and turned the knob. In the house itself, Kushina was still talking to Makoto about how she could have done better with Naruto, with said Uchiha trying to assure her that although what she did was wrong, the Uzumaki regretted doing what she did. Still, Kushina felt she should have done more, and had no one to blame but herself. They heard the door open, and Kushina realized how late it was since Makoto came and the kids must be back from the academy. She was about to say a greeting to her kids but stopped when she saw them enter the room with a look that told her they were being apprehensive about something. Makoto noticed it as well as she blinked in confusion. "Hey Ka-chan, Makoto Oba," Mito said nervously, now making the two women more confused. "Mito, what's the mat?" She stopped as her eyes widened as she spotted someone else come out and stood beside them. A person who Kushina never thought she would see again, now grown up, and dressed like a true shinobi. The same blonde, red-tipped hair, in the same style as her husband's, cerulean blue eyes, and 6 whiskered-shaped birthmarks, 3 on each side of his face. Makoto was in the same boat as Kushina as she saw her best friend's son, now standing right here in front of them, standing next to his sisters and brother. She had been telling him that he would come home, but to be here when he did almost seemed poetic in a way. Kushina, who had tears about to spill from her eyes, took a shaky step forward. Naruto," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she slowly began to approach her son. Is it really you?"